A common claim you will find on the internet is Christians are anti-science. A reason given is that Christianity either holds back scientific progress or causes many Christians to oppose science because modern research contradicts the Bible. A common argument that is used to support these conclusions is that polls have indicated that Christians are a minority within scientific professions within the US, while making up a majority of the American population. So an inference is drawn that if Christianity was a pro-science movement, Christians would be accurately represented within scientific fields. Despite this idea gaining popularity among many secularists and atheists online, when we dive deeper into the research, you will see this conclusion is not supported by the data. In fact, some research even indicates that scientists within academia may have biases against Christians. Jerry Coyne wrote an article a few years ago titled, "Yes, there is a war between science and religion." Much of the article relies on a caricature of what faith actually means, and we addressed this in another video. But he also notes there is evidence that most who practice science are atheists and agnostics. To quote, "There's a huge disparity in religiosity between American scientists and Americans as a whole. 64% of our elite scientists are atheists or agnostics, compared to only 6% of the general population. More than a tenfold difference. Whether this reflects differential attraction of non-believers to science or science eroding belief, I suspect both factors operate. The figures are prima facie evidence for a science-religion conflict." Luckily, Coyne provides a source for this claim, but when I clicked on the link, I was surprised to find it was a book that I've already read. The research of Ecklund and Scheitle could hardly be used to argue that Christians are anti-science, or as evidence for a science-religion conflict, unless you cherry-pick the data found in their book. For example, in the final chapter they say, "After 5 years of research, here is what we know. Religious Americans of all types are interested in and appreciate science. They are open to accepting new narratives concerning the origin and development of life on Earth. They are not inherently hostile to environmentalism or technological progress. Most religious individuals do not view science and religion in conflict, and they say they're either independent of one another or collaborating. Most religious groups are roughly the same on measures of interest in scientific discoveries as compared to the general population, as well as measures on if science does more harm than good. And the majority of religious individuals are open to other views on topics surrounding the Big Bang and evolution. There was also no difference found between non-religious groups and religious groups on knowledge of uncontested scientific facts." Now, it is true they report most scientists with doctorates working at elite universities are either atheists or agnostics, but they also conducted another survey that factored in all rank-and-file scientists, meaning individuals who are educated and trained in science and who work in science-related occupations but are outside universities. In this survey, it was found the number of religious individuals in science was much closer to the distribution of religious views as found in the general population. So when they looked at a larger pool that included applied scientists, they did not find a drastic discrepancy with the general population. Now, some might contest this, as the survey included professions such as doctors, nurses, and engineers, not simply those who study science at universities. And when this specific group is looked at, it does appear to contain far more atheists and agnostics than what we find in the general population. However, Ecklund notes in later work that studied the views of scientists across several countries that a substantial majority of scientists do not believe that science and religion are intrinsically in conflict with each other. So the research does not support Coyne's claim that the figures are prima facie evidence for a science-religion conflict. Coyne is very much in the minority when he asserts science and religion are in conflict. Furthermore, it doesn't logically follow that most scientists at universities are atheists or agnostics to the claim that religions like Christianity are in conflict with science. That is a non sequitur at best. For example, Ecklund and Scheitle also note surveys reveal professors in the humanities and social sciences are just as irreligious as those in the natural sciences. Would this be evidence religion is opposed to English, religious studies, or art history? The National Science Foundation points out women are underrepresented in scientific professions. Does this mean women are at war with science? Of course not, and such a conclusion would be silly. So why does Jerry Coyne get to make this logical leap when it comes to religions? Some research has indicated the reason for a lack of religious individuals in science may be the result of bias on the part of the scientific community. A paper from 2020 looked at bias against Christians across 3 studies. One of the studies found no bias against Christians, but in the other 2, bias against Christians was found. They also found stronger levels of bias were directed at evangelical Christians, more so than other types of Christians. The authors indicate bias against Christians among scientists may be a factor in why Christians are underrepresented in science. They also highlighted other research, which shows Christians tend to be more attracted to helping professions, which indicates Christians have implicit motives to pursue careers in health, medical, and engineering fields, instead of taking positions as research professors. Research also indicates Christian parents encourage helping professions more so than unaffiliated parents. Studies indicate Christians are negatively stereotyped about their ability to work in science, and when Christians have been shown to be aware of this negative stereotype, they underperform on assessment tests in science. Additionally, some research has shown that scientists report negative attitudes of Christians broadly, and many Christians working in science have reported discrimination, more often than other groups. Ecklund and Scheitle report, 49% of religious scientists at elite universities feel their scientific colleagues do not view religion positively. I think universities are not always very accepting environments, one physicist told us, explaining, "It is really hard to be a religious academic, because the public opinion is such that you're either religious or you're a scientist. To say you are religious might mean other scientists would question your work." Evangelicals are also significantly more likely to report workplace religious discrimination than the general population, including rank-and-file scientists. Another survey indicated 43% of Protestant academic biologists report that they have been discriminated against in the workplace because of their religion. In 2021, research found that religiosity is positively associated with concealment of religious identity, which itself is negatively associated with identification as a scientist. Cultural images portray scientists as lacking religion, as well as that religious groups are seen as less competent in scientific fields. Thus, the 2021 study found that religious scientists working in research felt the need to conceal their religious identity, but also do not feel that their religion makes them less competent as scientists. In other words, negative stereotypes are likely to make them feel a need to hide their religious views, not because their religious views make them feel less competent as scientists. Correlating with all this research, another study looked at the prejudice attitudes of atheists across 3 countries. What they found was that atheists and agnostics showed prejudicial discriminatory attitudes towards anti-liberals, but also towards mere Christians, and atheists did so also towards Buddhists. This prejudice also included unwillingness to have anti-liberal and religionists even as neighbors. The latter indeed constitutes a strong indicator of discriminatory prejudice. If most scientists are atheist or agnostic, then this prejudice against religionists would be expected and correlate to the other research that indicates bias against Christians among scientists. So instead of Christians being anti-scientific, the data indicates that some scientists might be unconsciously discriminating against Christians, and this is a contributing factor as to why Christians are underrepresented in science. However, all this aside, if someone wants to suggest Christianity, or religion in general, is at war with science, you would need to demonstrate a causal link. In other words, one would need to demonstrate a core doctrine of Christianity necessarily entails a rejection of science, and then show this manifests in Christians through a peer-reviewed study. So far, this has not been demonstrated. In fact, meta-analytical research indicates religion does not correspond to the idea of creating individuals with dysfunctional personalities that make one closed-minded to new ideas. Psychologists theorize there are 5 dimensions to personalities, which are often studied in the field. These fall under the acronym OCEAN for openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Openness is observed when a subject is more willing to try new things or be open to new ideas. They also tend to be more creative and better able to think in abstract concepts. Conscientiousness refers to a positive trait of being mindful of others and their own behavior. One is more likely to pay attention to details and not procrastinate. Extroversion refers to being more outgoing and being willing to create more friendships. Agreeableness refers to altruistic and prosocial behaviors. One is more likely to empathize with others and assist in helping when able. And finally, neuroticism is the only trait you want to negatively correlate with. It reflects a personality that experiences a lot of stress and anxiety. Those with high amounts of this trait tend to experience mood swings and irritability. Meta-analytical research indicates those with an intrinsic religious orientation correlate with 3 of the 5 big personality traits, and do not significantly negatively correlate with openness to experience. Those identified as mature in their religion did positively correlate more with openness to experience, as well as extroversion and conscientiousness. It was specifically religious fundamentalists that were moderately negatively correlated with openness to experience, and even those with an extrinsic orientation did not have a significant negative correlation to openness to experience. If religion or Christianity bred a mentality of rejecting science or new ideas, we should expect to see the personalities of religious individuals to negatively correlate with openness in significant measures. But this is not what has been found. And this also correlates with Ecklund's findings, which show that most Christians do not see their religious views in science in conflict. Thus, the research does not indicate that Christians are inherently anti-science. This is what we should expect to find, given the history of Christianity and science. Numerous scholars have noted Christians have contributed greatly to scientific discoveries and achievements over the past 2,000 years, and have also noted that Christianity was important for the rise of science. Noah Ephron notes Christianity was not the only factor that gave birth to modern science, but he also says, generations of historians and sociologists have discovered many ways in which Christians, Christian beliefs, and Christian institutions played crucial roles in fashioning the tenets, methods, and institutions of what in time became modern science. Today, almost all historians agree that Christianity, Catholicism, as well as Protestantism, moved many early modern intellectuals to study nature systematically. Historians have also found that notions borrowed from Christian belief found their way into scientific discourse, with glorious results. The very notion that nature is lawful, some scholars argue, was borrowed from Christian theology. E.O. Wilson asked the question why science didn't rise in China, which had far more technology than Europe at the time. He concluded, of probably even greater importance, Chinese scholars abandoned the idea of a supreme being with personal and creative properties. No rational author of nature existed in their universe. Consequently, the objects they meticulously described did not follow universal principles, but instead operated within particular rules followed by those entities in the cosmic order. In the absence of a compelling need for the notion of general laws, thoughts in the mind of God, so to speak, little or no search was made for them. If Christianity was crucial for the development of science, it doesn't make sense to claim they are at war. Many early church fathers embraced the natural philosophy of their day and taught that Christians should embrace the truths we discover about the natural world. Early church fathers taught nature was the 67th book of Scripture. The history of Christianity is filled with examples of men and women working towards the progress of science. What is actually in conflict with modern science is creation science. But the historian Ronald Numbers has documented that this view is actually more of a modern phenomenon. Most Christians who describe themselves as creationists before the 1950s held to either a day-age theory or a gap theory, including those involved in the Scopes trial. Young Earth creationism was a minority view among creationists before the 1960s, and a minority view among Christians during the past few centuries. Young Earth creationism was primarily promoted by George McCready Price, a Seventh-day Adventist with no scientific training. Seventh-day Adventists were mostly Young Earth creationists because their founder, Ellen G. White, claimed she was given visions. She said she was shown how the whole world was created in 6 days about 6,000 years ago, and then the entire world was reshaped during a global flood. Price, being a Seventh-day Adventist, held to this idea, but thought he could prove it scientifically. According to numbers, at the time, most creationists or anti-evolutionists rejected this view. It wasn't until John Whitcomb and Henry Morris recycled a lot of Price's ideas in their book, The Genesis Flood, that young Earth creationism became a major view among Christians. Prior to this, Numbers notes young Earth creationism was a minority view that was mostly associated with the Seventh-day Adventists, and mostly because of White's visions. In truth, theologians note Genesis is compatible with a number of interpretations that do not contradict modern science. So the idea Christianity promotes an anti-scientific mentality is not supported by the scientific or historical data. I cannot speak for other religions, but there is no good reason to think Christianity is at war with science. Science is the study of the natural world. It doesn't make theological claims. Christianity makes theological and philosophical claims about the nature of reality beyond the limits of science. By definition, science and Christianity are different subjects, and therefore are perfectly compatible.